Philip, do you want to comment?
Yeah. Dr. Nolan, you've already mentioned that you think there's something wrong with the market. From an Irish perspective, before you took the job, did you think that it was worthwhile making investments in the energy market in Britain?
Looking external?
Would you do it? Yeah, would you have done it?
I think I probably would, yes, in the sense that if nothing else, there is a clear need for investment in Britain. I think everybody knows that. There are various stories about the amount of investment required.
Would you have expected decent return on your investment?
I probably would, yes. I have to say, for a variety. But if I can unpack that a little, as I said, I talked about it being impossible to look at supply and generation separately. Not impossible, very difficult. What I would say is the generation market over the last 2 or 3 years does not seem to be producing very high returns. Thus, some of the complaints I've had are not just from small suppliers, whom I will be meeting, as Mr. Robertson asked, but also some of the independent generators who say we're not making enough. All the money is being made in the supply sector.
Do you think the business models of the big six, do you think they're profitable?
Well, I think the evidence suggests that they are making profits, yes, between the two of them.
I've been shown some sort of data around economic profit that's pretty scary, actually. It basically says that all 6 companies, with possible exception of Centrica, though they're now showing signs of stress, all 6 companies do not make money at all. And in fact, their business models are value destroying. And I wonder, does Ofgem, what sort of metrics do you use to assess the profitability of these companies? I mean, do you make any assessment in terms of their long-term viability as companies?
I think we do. One of our duties is to make sure that our licence holders are capable of financing their activities. But in the recent market assessment, we looked, I think, reasonably carefully at profitability. It would be a major theme for the competition market investigation. But I suppose I will say that what we found is that profitability for the big 6 is broadly constituted in terms of their generation and supply arms together, has risen over the last few years. But they're making a fair amount of profits in supply on the evidence we've seen, but less in generation. Overall, however, and it does vary, and Centrica is probably the most profitable. To us, they seem to be making profits. I can certainly follow up in writing to you on this if you would like, Mr. Lee.
Yeah, the data I've seen is that EDF is totally unviable.
I think EDF...
Totally unviable, and therefore must be receiving significant support from the French state.
I would not have seen that, I have to say, Mr. Lee. What I would say is the evidence from, I remember, and I will obviously correct and write to you if I'm incorrect in this, is that in the supply market, EDF is not doing well, but it is making significant profits in generation, predominantly because of its nuclear fleet.
So if you're right, then why is investment in the market not so good?
I think you get.
If you're telling me they're making profits, why are people not sort of stumping up the cash and looking for a good return?
I think there are a couple of issues about that. One is, I think, and I'm certainly not trying to speak for the Secretary of State here, but I think he would say, well, there is significant investment, and certainly there has been a reasonable flow of investment, including in gas plant over the last few years. We need a lot more. I freely acknowledge that. But I would say, coming back to what I said earlier, and this is one of the reasons why I think the model of vertical integration needs to be studied. The generation market by itself is perhaps not giving huge returns. New gas plant. So again, the fleet, if you like, the fleet of generation that Britain currently have, you could say there are 4 main arms to it. My apologies for going on at length, Mr. Lee. I hope to finish quickly. But there's nuclear, there's coal, there's gas, and there's renewables. By and large, new nuclear is a long way off. There's going to be pretty much no new coal, and yet they're currently the 2 most profitable forms of generation. Meanwhile, new gas plant is less profitable, and yet gas and renewables are going to be the new generation build, and that's one of the problems, if you will, that the generation that needs to be built, which will renewables have some subsidies to allow for it. Gas doesn't. So gas, which is where we really need generation, is one of the least profitable new builds.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I'm trying to marry what you're saying with a presentation that was given to me, which essentially says the 6 companies aren't viable. And I'm wondering what the metric is. How do you assess profitability? Is it total shareholder return over time? Is it what is your measure? Because if the people who came to see me are right, there's going to be no investment of the sort of order that is required to keep the lights on, inverted commas, over the next 5 to 10 years. So if they're right, you seem to be quite wrong. Okay, so therefore, if Ofgem is wrong, not much hope of you having much trust anytime soon.
Well, I certainly hope Ofgem is not wrong. I would say some of them, in terms of a couple of queries, in terms of the measures we use a variety of measures. In particular, we use something called the return on capital employed, or sometimes known as ROCE, to measure generation profitability. We then use various other measures to look at the supply profitability, which is the margin above the supply price, and then we use a variety of measures to look at the overall level of profitability. Again, I'm very happy to revert to you on this, but I would still think the profitability has risen over the last few years. In terms of the future and in terms of investment and in terms of investments for keeping the light on, if I may say a little bit about that, I would say that there is a capacity mechanism being designed by the Department of Energy and Climate Change, which is due to come in for 2018 onwards, which is deliberately designed to encourage new gas plants to build. And that in some senses is its explicit purpose. The idea of capacity mechanisms as they exist have been used across Europe, and certainly France and Germany are both seeking to bring one in. So I think that is the tool being chosen to give profitability for future investments.
And finally, if profits are growing, if the profitability of these companies, as you state, are growing, would you expect to see more new competitors coming into the marketplace?
I think I would, and
Are we seeing?
We are seeing more investment in the marketplace.
Are we seeing more competitors in the market?
We are seeing what we're not seeing, I suppose, is we're not seeing competitors entering both supply and generation simultaneously. And one of the essential questions for the Competition and Markets Authority to study is whether or not the structure of the market is sufficient that it can permit efficient entry on either one side or the other, or do you need to enter in both? I suppose that would be the key point. The big six have operations in generation, they have operations in supply. Whether or not the structure of their market is such that you must enter in both, it's very difficult to enter alone, is something the CMA will, I think, ultimately have to take a clear view on.
So would you agree then that those people who say that because we don't actually consume that much Russian gas, that somehow we are more resilient than perhaps Germany is? Or would you say that that's an overly simplistic position in that 27% I think it is of gas use in Germany comes from essentially Gazprom? When they stop receiving that gas, if that was to happen, they're just going to go to the Norwegians and offer more money, I suspect, for their gas. And we get 70% of our oil and gas from Norway.
Yeah.
So by definition, what's happening in eastern Ukraine could have a significant impact upon the cost of gas to the British consumer.
I very much agree with that, Mr. Lee. I think that is the case, yeah.
Okay, so if that being the case, and I know you've already just said that there's a sort of a shared role here, which slightly concerns me that there's shared sort of responsibility in this area. Is there a measure of resilience? Has Ofgem modelled what would happen? I mean, I'm reminded that the stock market in July 1914 was peaking. So much for markets predicting war. I just wonder whether we have a sort of a doomsday modelling arrangement where we can actually say, well, actually, if this happens and this happens, this is going to happen.
I'm certainly not going to say that I've seen that kind of doomsday model. I know the team are working intensively on it, and working generally on this issue.
So there is work going on.
There is work going on. There's also work going on with DEC. I think there are certainly measures. If there were ever a gas crisis, there are specific measures in place to deal with those kind of crises. In terms of the specifics,
how resilient are we though? I mean, how many days, if the worst happens, how many days can we exist?
I can't give you that kind of figure off the top of my head, but I will revert to you within a couple of days on this.
You should have that figure at the top of your head.
I possibly should, Mr. Lee, and I apologise for not doing so, but I will revert to you.
Are there people who have that figure at their fingertips?
Off the top of their head, I'm not sure.
Should there be? I mean, I can't see the future, but I think it's particularly important when it comes to energy that we have some sense of what might happen here, because there's an unpredictability to the situation, and it slightly concerns me that you don't know, and that you sort of imply that others might not know.
I'm not sure if people have figures off the top of the head. I take your general point strongly, that, and I'm certainly not putting forward any view that because we don't get gas directly from Russia, we're not potentially affected.
But that's actually been stated government sort of position. Actually, I've seen it in the papers that the government's position is it's okay. We only get a couple of % from the Russians. We're fine. I mean, it's remarkably naive, I think, because it's a tradable commodity.
Well, I concur with your view that we could be affected, not so evidently in terms of direct shortages of supply here, but I think we could be affected through the price mechanism that you referred to. But I apologise for not having this figure off hand, but I will revert to you.
Alan.